The biggest thing I hear is I don't want to hurt my kids. Like, I don't want to ruin them. I don't want to spoil them. For some people, especially larger amounts, that can be a burden.
Everyone's so focused on preparing the money for the family. How do we get the family ready for the money?
Money messages are formed in children as young as 7. The 90% lost by generation 3. He tells a story of a man who had several businesses that he'd built, and he wanted to pass these businesses on to his son. His dad throws the money in the fire. He's like, you didn't earn this money. And it was kids with a marshmallow. If you can wait 5 minutes, you will get 2 marshmallows.
All of the pain that I experienced made me who I am today.
There's a lot that you would miss in finding your purpose and finding out who you are without the money part being a factor. Generosity is the antidote to greediness.
Welcome everyone to this month's webinar. Today, I'm joined by Thea Lowery, who is our Chief Relational Strategist, and we're going to be talking about how to make an inheritance a blessing and not a burden. Before we get started, just a couple of things that I do need to just let you know. If you've got questions, you can put those in the chat. But the way that we record these webinars, we can't answer the questions until near the end of the webinar because they won't let us record the questions. So if you could put them into the chat, we'll answer them. You can hang around, we'll stop the recording, and then we'll answer all of your questions at that point. The other thing that I do have to do is make our attorneys happy. So if you give me one quick second, I do have to read our regulations. Paradiem is a registered investment advisor. This webinar is provided for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Past market performance is not indicative of future results. All investing involves risk, including the potential of loss of principal. Market commentary reflects opinions as of the date of the publication, subject to change. Advisory services are provided only pursuant to a written advisory agreement. I don't know why I had to talk all about investments because I don't think we're going to talk anything about investments today, but those are the disclosures that the attorneys require. Thea, thank you for being here.
Of course.
Hey, I'm going to just jump into it because I think that we've got a lot to cover today. I'm excited to kind of go over everything, but you get to talk to families a lot about the relational side of this, and we're leading off with something that sounds maybe a little like, like almost we pause and ask a question. So it's like an inheritance, a burden instead of a blessing. So what does that look like when somebody says, an inheritance could be a burden? Where does that come from, or where have you kind of seen that maybe play out that doesn't come to mind? Because we always think that inheritance might be a blessing.
Definitely. Well, and I think it really speaks to who you're raising, right? Like, it's not just about the money part of it and like how much it is or whatever. And so even if you look at the spectrum of what you could potentially leave to your kids, everything from, let's say, $25,000. I mean, it could be anything, right? But $25,000 to $25 million. Like, what does that all look like? For some people, especially larger amounts, that can be a burden. Like, there's the expectations. There's what do I do with all of this? There's sometimes, depending on your net worth, sometimes your children's identity can kind of be wrapped up in that. Or if they lived in this very wealthy environment, but can't actually be able to support that based on what they're making. Like, there's so many different things at play when you really think about wealth in general, that it's something that you really have to be able to focus with on your kids.
Well, kind of on that front then, so from an inheritance standpoint, what maybe are some of the most common misconceptions that you see people when they're thinking about an inheritance? What are the most common misconceptions that people maybe come to the table with when they're thinking about it?
Yeah. The biggest thing I hear is I don't want to hurt my kids. Like, I don't want to ruin them. I don't want to spoil them. I don't want to give them so much that they don't have to do something to sustain their life on their own. That's probably the biggest thing I hear. And I've even heard it when I've met their children, and their children are great kids. Like, they're great kids. They have good level heads on their shoulders. But I think sometimes when people are planning, it can turn into, well, I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to only give them like this very little bit, or I'm going to be so careful, and they don't necessarily take into account the individuals they raised.
So what I hear you saying is, sometimes our caution can keep us from the possibility of blessing them with what they could handle. So you're talking about being a burden. This is almost the opposite that sometimes you see as a family will withhold something that the child could probably actually maybe even manage or take care of out of a desire to be cautious.
Yes. very cautious. You'll see both sides of it, right? Some people really think about it so much that they want to be very limited, and some people don't think about it at all and think just leave it all. So it's definitely a spectrum.
One of the things I want to, before we dive into a couple of the different tools and a couple of different ideas, can we spend a little bit of time talking about equality in inheritance? Because that's a very American, U.S. central focus thing. I think that's one of the things I've observed as we've served families along the way, and I'm sure you have as well, is like this idea of it's got to be equal. It's got to be equal. And if you go historically or you even go biblically and look at how different inheritance, that's not always been the mindset. That's not always been the way of thinking about it. So when you're having those conversations and we think about those misconceptions of equality, what do you find coming out of those conversations or coming up inside of that?
I tend to get curious around that. What's the reason for the equality? I think simplicity, just you've taken a lot of the guesswork out of it, right? You split it 3 ways or 4 ways or 2 ways or whatever. It definitely makes it easier that way. But there's so many other factors at play with the readiness. A lot of times families with multiple children, I think your family would be included in this. You have the one who really gets it, the finances, understands, the investing or whatever. Then you have the one that's a spender. Then you have the one that doesn't want to let anything leave their bank accounts. But yeah, you look at the individuals, number one. The other thing is you can see what could actually be a helpful tool for each of, like money is a tool, right? So you can see for each one of your kids, what could give them a leg up? What may be an education for one that is a $60,000 or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get them into med school and through that schooling, for example. And then the other one decides they want to work in a trade and they want to get certified in a mechanic or whatever. Those two look very different, but if you're setting them up for success, does it have to be dollar for dollar? Those are questions that I like to ask. I think they're just things that you can consider and work through, but getting curious around why does it have to be equal? Communicating to your kids about what you're willing to give and kind of what that looks like too. The communication piece is really key for there to not be that jealousy or like the sibling rivalry around that's not fair. They get this and that, which then again just speaks to lifetime giving because you get the opportunity to actually talk through that while you're here and not the lawyers trying to tell you,
I want to talk about lifetime giving, but because we do that, I think there's another dynamic that, as you were talking about my kids, really kind of pops up. I think the way, at least this is the maturation that I've watched happen inside of our families. There's a way that you think about inheritance while your kids are young. There's a way that you think about inheritance maybe when your kids hit mid-teens to mid-20s. I think there's also a mind shift that comes around inheritance as the kids get late 20s, maybe even through mid-30s or 40s. And then there's even the way that you think about inheritance as they get older. Could you, without, we don't have to go too deep, but, do you mind talking just about a little bit, maybe about some of the shifts or even how you kind of counsel and walk families through that different dynamic? Because you're seeing different things about the kids and there's different potential burdens and potential blessings that sit in each one of those phases.
Yeah. From a planning perspective, I think there are 2 sides to it. So one side of it is intentionally preparing your kids at each of these age for what's age appropriate, involving them in that. I think a lot of times they're not intentional about the financial teaching. That was at least me growing up. And it's not because they don't care. It's more lack of intention. But it's also just lack of education. I know growing up, I never had that in school. They didn't teach me how to really do a budget or anything like that. My parents didn't either. And so when I got out on my own, I'm like, oh yeah, get a credit card because that will help me supplement my income when I'm in school. And, all of these things that I learned or picked up along the way, I learned from my parents and how they modeled it. It wasn't an actual conversation. So I would say that first. So there's that tool. Be intentional with each of the ages as to what you're sharing with them, involving them in to start that communication early. But from an inheritance standpoint, if something were to happen to you tomorrow and looking at the age that your kids are now, understanding that without you as a part of that teaching tool, be very careful with what you give them at younger ages. So yes, you'll need them taken care of or, factoring all of that into it. But especially in the 20s, being careful. How do you give them a leg up? How do you give them some support to nudge them, but not give them so much that they feel like, oh, now I don't have to worry about it. Like there's a lot that you would miss in finding your purpose and finding out who you are without the money part being a factor. So take the money part out of it. It's hard enough being in your 20s. Throwing a bunch of money on a child that's in their 20s trying to figure out their life and what they really want to do.
Yeah.
Be cautious.
Yeah. I'm going to apologize. You guys need to know Thea and I worked on what questions we were going to go over. So I'm taking her for a little bit of a loop by throwing her out. But I feel like there's some good stuff sitting inside of here, which is, I think the other thing, Thea, that I want to, especially in the 20s, okay, let's talk a little bit about this conflict, even as a parent, that I feel that is everything that shaped and created who I am was built inside of the struggle versus the desire to save or keep your kids from a struggle, right? I mean, like we hate to see our kids going through pain. All of the pain that I experienced made me who I am today. And a lot of times I think that you brought it up about the 20s. That is no fresher than in that time period of like 20 to 30 and I think you and I have read the same data, but that's such an important period that the failure actually shapes and it almost fights who you are as a parent. So did you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, and we're living in it, right?
That's right.
We have kids in this age. The way that I tend to look at it, especially from a financial standpoint, since we're talking inheritance or money as a piece, it's a spectrum between rescuing, support, and empowering. So rescuing is what a lot of times feels better for everyone involved. It feels better for the kid. It gets them out of the immediate thing. And I'm not saying that that's never the right way to go. In a big situation, rescuing can be okay, but be careful not to rescue because it feels better faster.
Yeah.
But looking at support, if you have to support your kids through a tough time, what boundaries are you putting around that? What are the expectations, and be sure that you're clear about those? Because a lot of times you as a parent will have expectations that your child may never know, or be verbalized, and then they're letting you down, and it causes this conflict between the two of you when they were never vocalized to begin with. But the empowering piece is where you can really look at whatever help you are providing. And I don't even mean financial. Like you can say even just supporting them. Is it helping give them a bump up and supporting them in what will become who God has for them to be, who God's created them to be? You can be through them in the times of struggle without bailing them out, loving them, supporting them through it. But when you experience those things and you really grow in that, if I had had a perfect childhood, would I be okay in the job that I'm in today? I doubt it.
Right.
And would I loved for my parents to have rescued me from all the things that happened along the way? Of course. But who would I be?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have the grit that I need. I wouldn't dig in and really learn the things that I was missing or weaknesses I had. I wouldn't learn how to overcome those. And so just don't ever underestimate what your kids can learn when they struggle.
I think this is a great pivot to then kind of go into this discussion on lifetime inheritance. I mean, so when we look at, so much, and I love the idea because I don't know about you, I'm starting to see more and more discussion about this idea of lifetime inheritance than maybe even I saw 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I love that it's becoming more mainstream, this idea. But when we use the word lifetime inheritance, I think sometimes we're so comfortable with it. Why don't you just, we keep throwing this word around. What is the idea of a lifetime inheritance versus any other kind of inheritance?
Yeah, the idea of it is being able to give your kids some of their inheritance while you're still living. So, and I say that, and it may sound simple and maybe it doesn't, but a lot of times plans are built so that when first person dies, this happens. When second person dies, this happens. And so people are living a lot longer these days.
Yep.
So when you really look at how old your kids are going to be by the time they inherit something at your passing or your spouse's passing or both of your passings, they could be well in their 70s.
Yeah.
Like, cool. maybe you're helping supplement some of their retirement, but what are the opportunities that you have to give them a leg up in what is going to become their journey along the way, but being strategic about that. And again, like we were talking with the 20s, just being careful, giving them an education, cool, but also having those expectations around, if I pay for your education, this is what I'm expecting from you. So that they have that ownership. Maybe they have to have a job to pay for whatever they want to do outside of their educational expenses. And that's just one of a million different opportunities. But with a house, for example, a lot of times we'll hear people will want to help with a down payment for a home. Okay. But when you're thinking about that, a down payment up to what amount?
Sure.
What kind of house do you want them to actually be able to afford? Because if they can afford a house, or let's say you want to buy them a home, what if that is in a place where they would never be able to live or be able to actually pay for the property taxes in that area? So there's more complexity to it, but you do have the opportunity of being able to give to them while you're living and then see how they manage it. Talk through the things. You can share that education and that teaching piece while you're still alive versus they inherit XYZ whenever you pass away. And there's no sharing of wisdom through that.
I mean, the communication and wisdom seems to be a real key part of what we're talking about. I mean, from the standpoint of, you were talking about, even rescuing, making sure there's communication in the lifetime inheritance, making sure there's communication. And I think that you keep going back to that element. I think that's an important, piece of what's happening. And when we get to the end of today, we're actually going to have a free resource that people can use that will help around this communication dynamic. I want to come back to lifetime inheritance in a minute, but could you talk about the important element of this wisdom? And I'm going to use some of our terms internally, like wisdom versus wealth. I mean, you can just leave wealth, but without wisdom. Talk a little bit about this idea of the communication and the wisdom that's happening inside of that and how important that piece is.
Yeah. I mean, being able to pass on the wisdom that you learned. There's a book, and unfortunately I haven't finished it. I'll just own it that I haven't finished it. But it's called Strangers in Paradise. If it were on Audible, I probably would have listened to it like 15 times by now. But the really interesting concept in it is that when you are Generation 1 wealth, you went through the struggle. You lived poor. You grew up a certain way. Your kids come into that somewhere, right? Like somewhere on the spectrum of your wealth journey. Being able to share what it was like to struggle, because if your kids never knew what it was like to have life without X, or what it was like to really struggle, expecting them to get it and really have that gratitude and that real sense of accomplishment that you feel, all of these things that you feel, expecting them to have that without the journey that you had is not fair, really. It's without you being intentional with sharing what that was like. That's really all you can do, unless you want to just send them out and have them experience that on their own. And some parents do that, where it's like, hey, go figure out life for, X amount of years, just without the money, and feel that struggle part of it, because you learn so much from that. And it's hard to teach that without sharing your own mistakes, your own hardships along the way, struggles. I would also say people have trouble talking about money. I don't know why. My own parents are the same. It's like, okay, well, this is kind of the plan that we have, but I have zero idea about numbers, zero idea if there's even anything. Like, I have no clue. Right. And this is my job. So I'm like, hey, can we have a conversation, just because they're getting older now? And I'm like, what happens if your mental capacity goes down? And like, I don't even understand the plan that you've put in place. So taking that stigma away of talking about money, talking about the numbers. If you don't trust your kids, why don't you trust your kids? And how can you bridge that gap between where you are today and building that trust that they can handle what you would leave them, what you would want to talk to them about, all of those different pieces. Like it's a process.
Well, and I think one other thing too, you mentioned this, but I think it's worth having this conversation, because we've got some people I know who are watching who are grandparents. And one of the things that I know that I've been saying, we've been talking a lot about, how do we cast 100-year vision? And everyone's so focused on preparing the money for the family, right? How do we get the money ready for the family? And what we've really been challenging people to ask the question is, how do we get the family ready for the money? And that's part of what this dialogue is about today. But one of the things that I think, so I find this in my own life as we're building our business and things, there are experiences my kids have had that have been hard and rough. And so they've seen it's not this smooth, easy.
Right.
It's the grandchildren who come behind that are the most likely to lose the wisdom portion. So we've been putting so much around the children, and we're going to stick around. We're going to come back around to lifetime inheritance because I think this can be valid even with grandchildren as they grow up and get a little bit older as well. Could be college education or homes, or we're going to talk more about that. But talk a little bit to the grandchildren component, because I think they're more at risk of not seeing the struggle than maybe even the children.
That's 100% true. And it, again, comes back to the stories and communication. Like, don't underestimate the wisdom that you have to pour into your grandchildren. And I would say that one of the most interesting things I've come across in research through the years is that money messages are formed in children as young as 7. They're pretty ingrained message. So you can change it over time, but being able to teach things like saving, spending at a young age, they will understand more than you realize, and understanding how to grow that with their capacity to learn.
Yeah.
But from a grandparent standpoint, there's a family that we work with where the grandparents were the one who taught the kids of the grandchildren. Yeah. Who taught the grandchildren about the 3 buckets, the spend, save, give.
Yeah.
And their grandchildren remember that to this day, that was what really was their first interaction with how to even think about money. And that came from the grandparents of theirs that had the least amount of money, because they were 3rd generation wealth, but that came from the ones who were described as poor, which I thought was really crazy. But then on the flip side, the 1st generation grandparent, they pass down the statistics that we talk about, the 90% lost by generation 3. So those grandkids remembered from that this huge weight of like, it's on me. I could lose it all. What if I lose it all? What if I don't want any of this? What if I don't even know how to think about any of this? So it's an interesting dynamic, and that's within the same family that I'm talking about. It was interesting to see.
Well, and one of the things I think that this really speaks to is the importance of communication, I'm going to say again, but also the importance of family meetings where there's actually a discussion and a planned discussion around things that matter. I go back to, at the end of the webinar here today, we'll give you access to a tool that we've created that can do a family meeting around these types of discussions and some of that piece. But, sometimes there's a couple of things I guess I would say. One is we're reluctant to have a family meeting. That's one. 2, if we have one, it's better to have a family meeting than not have one. That would be my communication. If we have one, my second piece of advice is try and make sure that it is at least balanced 50-50 wisdom and money. Sometimes we've run across families who are like, we had a family meeting and we talked about all the financial stuff and we went over the details. Again, we got the money ready for the family, but there's not the piece of that of getting the family ready for the money. So making sure there's a good balance. And I would even say, from what we've experienced, that maybe even 60% relational or 70% relational. And
exactly. And don't make it a stuffy boardroom meeting either. Like, let it be fun. It doesn't have to be so serious. It doesn't have to be mom and dad, like, let me tell you all the things. But the wisdom and the stories share throughout your experience. If you find the opportunity and something pops in your head, don't underestimate. Maybe this would be a great time to share. Like, keep that little. But I would say with family meetings, the 3 things that we typically would use as a framework, now dependent on, whatever, but as developing family meetings, a relational piece, a financial piece, and a generosity piece. Generosity is the antidote to greediness, P.S.
Yeah, that's good.
That's something we've definitely learned. But if you can cover those 3 things, that as your framework would be a really great starting point. And the tool that we have that we can give after this call today is really, again, like we did last time with the breaking bread, it's having conversations around where is everybody at today with, it has some giving in it, but it's mostly like, has your experience been with money? Because you as a parent have been giving an experience with money, intentional, verbal, or not. You have modeling, probably some teaching along the way, You involved them in some things, but the more intentionality you can put behind it, the more you're being prepared to do the right things versus the wrong things. I even had that conversation with Dan last night. I was like, man, Jackson's 22, and I look at what were the missed opportunities I had? Like, what would I have done differently if I looked back? And really, although he's made some of the mistakes that we've made already, he's turned it around on his own without lectures from us. So we're kind of just like, okay, but he also has this, like, yes, he got into a little bit of debt, but he's prioritizing paying that off before the next step. And so, you'll see the things that you unintentionally taught happen too, but being able to model that. And sometimes you even learn from your kids. You're like, yeah, what I didn't want to do or what I do want to do now moving forward. So
I think one other thing, the last piece on these family meetings that I would add is don't underestimate the value of outside help. And that could be from a book, that could be from a resource. I tell the story every time we get on here and talk about family meetings. My kids seem to talk more when I have someone and tell me more when I have someone else in the meeting other than me. I seem to get more honest and credible feedback because I'm dad. And that could even just be, I don't know if you want to reach out to, Thea or our teams and be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this family meeting. What ideas should I be thinking about? And we can kind of talk through and counsel that. Or even if it's any other resource that's out there that you found. But don't feel like you have to go it alone on doing the family.
Right. And I would say a facilitator has the ability to keep things moving or find ways to pivot or get more curious around certain things without the emotional piece. Because sometimes your kids can unintentionally say something that either steers your thinking or your focus in a different direction because of all the history that you have, or maybe hits a nerve and you all of a sudden defenses go up or whatever, where having a facilitator can help you kind of keep a lid on things and keep things moving and get curious without accusatory. I would say that's where I've noticed that being a big strength.
So this is such a great discussion. I want to come back to a lifetime inheritance idea, especially because this could be grandchildren or even children. What are some of the other things that you've seen families do that is kind of a lifetime inheritance model that becomes kind of that teaching tool in that area of where they can walk alongside them?
Well, I wanted to share this story. Because I feel like it's a great illustration. It's from Entrusted, and I've listened to that book several times. We've talked about that too. But the story
by David York, if anyone's interested. It's
David
a book
York,
by an attorney, David York, out of Utah.
Yeah. So he tells a story of a man who had several businesses that he'd built, and he wanted to pass these businesses on to his son. And with his son, he was like, I want to pass these on to you. I will sign everything over to you if you can go and earn $10,000 on your own. Take a couple months, earn $10,000, come back to me, and we'll talk about it. So the boy he was the man, goes to the bank and he talks to the banker and he gets 10 grand from the bank. He's like, just give me this. I'll pay it back with interest. Month 2 goes by, brings it to his dad. His dad throws the money in the fire. He's like, you didn't earn this money. And the kid is like, man, how did he know that? Like the banker must have called him or something. So then he goes to a friend, gets money from a friend, swears he's going to pay him back, comes, brings the money to his dad. Dad throws it in the fire. And he's like, you didn't earn that money. He's like, how does he know this? So the only choice he has is to really go out and actually earn this money. So he goes, works 3 different jobs. He's like scrounging, busting his butt and learning a lot of things along the way. Comes back to his dad, gives his dad the 10 grand. His dad throws the money in the fire and the kid dives for the money. And he's like trying to pull out the burning bills. And he's like, you earned that money. Like being able to teach things like that, being able to really like show your kids while you're living, how do you give them that struggle? How do you teach them those tools? Go back to your own story and look for the opportunities and the big nuggets. Not that they need to go through those necessarily, but what are the things that you could help them do or experience that can give them similar sorts of, I guess, ways to build character, ways to build grit, ways to build work ethic. What can you do on that side of it? So with money, with potential lifetime giving, the biggest ones that we've heard Education is a great tool. I would also caution you, and we know this with our own children, it's not always college.
Right.
Like it can look different for every kid. And really being able to grow them in their strengths and what they want to do. Being able to, with the house, we had a family out of California. Having a house in California is like really expensive.
Yeah.
And what $100,000 would do as a down payment for someone in Louisiana, very different for a family in California. So being able to gauge those sorts of differences, I would caution you buying them a house outright, but I mean, every situation is different. I'm trying to look at it from a high level without like specific family situations in mind. But then just looking for opportunities to help them get a leg up versus a handout. I would say, yeah, those tools.
I think of a couple of others that come to mind. One, we've had families where they've had children who have an opportunity to really work in their gifting, but maybe it's a lower income level that they would stay in that lifestyle. And the parents have created ways to supplement their income, whether that's in ministry. We've had some that have gone into education, and the parents have said, we recognize that it's a sacrifice to be in this. And as part of our blessing to you, we want to provide some lifetime inheritance to offset that, or even to allow one of the parents to stay at home.
That was the one that popped into mind when you said that. Yeah. We've had that built into plans too.
It's really, really tough, even if they've got a good job, for both parents not to work in the current economic environment. If that's a core value to your family and you're having communication dynamics around that, providing a type of inheritance on that. And then I would go back to even what you were talking about, this father, and to give a couple of stories, even from our own, is like, investing alongside your kids. And so, with my kids, because of this being the business that I'm in, we've talked about, there's two ways to own a business. You can own it privately and start your own thing from the ground up, or you can buy into someone else's business. And that's basically what quote unquote investing is. And so walking through, what are the businesses out there that you use? What do you like? What might you like to own? And then educating themselves on the profitability, but walking alongside them and helping them see and, helping them learn how to think about that. I also...
Not being, like you as a parent, not being the sole investor. So having them to seek investing from others into whatever their business idea is.
Absolutely. But what you start to see is when you do this as lifetime, now you're doing things together.
Right.
And I also remember Grayson got caught up in some other things, my youngest, but this is at least worth telling the story because it comes down to what are you teaching them and what are you showing them. She had an idea. She was like, I want a cookie. She's like, I want a business. I want a cookie distribution business because she liked baking. And I was like, well, every single business has a business plan. So she went to the library and checked out a book on writing, for kids, how to write business plans. And we walked through that and we created a brand and we looked at co-packaging places and and then school kind of got busy and everything and her desire to do that. But she's still pursuing business interests even inside of her pursuit of the arts. And I would attribute a lot of that to just coming back to communication and being intentional. But every moment is a teachable moment. And when we've got money involved and inheritance involved, how do we bring that in and think about that? What about, so we talk about inheritance being a burden. Where have we seen families go wrong? And it doesn't have to be families we've served, but I mean, just even if you observe that things are out.
I would go to the rescuing.
Yeah.
The rescuing, the bailing them out, the not letting them struggle. And I get it. Like, trust me, I 100% understand. And it comes from such a good place that it's where it's hard to really lean into that hard conversation. But I would say it's the rescuing and not wanting to see your kids struggle. That's what I've seen the most. And I would say it's also one of the hardest parts to counsel from. Because it's easier for an outsider to see it. And it's easier for a parent to defend when they really feel like that was the best for that situation. But I feel like you can rescue, but then what's your support look like? How are you getting to move to empowerment? Like, always try to move to the empowerment. It can be a temporary Band-Aid, but what are you going to help them do so that either that doesn't happen again, they learn from this experience, they can become better because they had to go through that.
Well, I'm going to add something that we've seen or I've seen along the way that I don't think we recognize. Let's go back to, I'm going to put two pieces together. So the importance of equality laid on top of rescuing or a child who's not mature enough to really handle what they're receiving. I've seen the compounding of that happen. Well, this child's doing really well, and this child's not doing so well. And so we give more to the one that's more immature, and really it would hurt them more. But we unbalance the inheritance towards the one that's more irresponsible. We've seen that happen.
Yeah.
And that, again, coming from a good heart or a good place, but not recognizing, oh my goodness, that could do more harm.
And what could you be doing to help move them in a better direction, or teach them whatever they're missing, whatever along the way was hard for them? I want to tell you this one study. This was about like delayed gratification. And the study was basically on the psychology of, are people just ingrained? Either they understand how to delay gratification or they don't. And it was kids with a marshmallow. So they were left in a room with a marshmallow sitting there. And they're like, if you can wait 5 minutes, you will get 2 marshmallows. I'm going to leave and come back. You would have kids that ate the marshmallow and you'd have kids that didn't. What they did learn is that the ones who did eat the marshmallow first, by being around adults or other people who could actually show them what to do, like how to keep yourself busy, put your head down, take a nap, like watching other people and what they did in order to delay the gratification taught them how to do it. So don't underestimate that if you see something, there may be a teaching opportunity that can change that. It's not like they're going to be like that forever. Which
goes down to maybe the last, not the last, but one of the other issues that we find is where we go completely silent. We talked about the importance of communication. We get so frustrated with the situation. We get so that we stay silent, but our actions, maybe through fueling the bad behavior or things like that, speak louder than the silence we're maintaining.
And kids are building a story, like something's being communicated. If not verbally, it's being communicated. And so how do you get the words out there so you can deal with them? You know, what is the story that they're building? What's the story? What's the judgments that you have, or the fears that you have? How can you talk through some of those things just to get them out on the table, and then you can deal with them? It's the stuff that goes on in the background. It's happening. Whether it's verbal and said or not, it's happening.
What's the best way to kind of reframe the conversation? I mean, how do we help families? So we're talking about making an inheritance a blessing, not a burden, and preparing the family for the money. How do we help families shift from thinking about what do we leave, like the financial side, to who are we preparing?
Well, the activity that we created could be a great starting point. And so it's kind of gauging, and it's built, and I'm pretty sure, let me
Why don't you tell them a little bit about what it is, and then we'll talk about in a minute how to get it. So why don't you tell them what
it's essentially, it's a conversation in a bowl. I've created different questions in these different categories. You cut them out, put them in a bowl, go around the room, pick the questions, and people just answer the questions. You don't have to do a lot. You could just do one. If you have younger kids, don't belabor the point. But just being able to gauge where your family is around money in general first. And it's pretty benign. And the one thing that I did add is an important note. This is not a judgment zone. This isn't like, oh, you said that, let me lecture you now in front of the whole family on this circumstance or whatever. But it's just you're trying to gauge where you're at today. And then being able to be intentional about, what are you modeling as parents? What are you teaching them intentionally, because you can see there are these opportunities for growth? And then what are you involving them in? So there are age appropriate things you can involve them in at different stages. And I can actually pull that together, just some ideas based on ages of kids of ways you can start involving them. But the more that you can be intentional about what you're passing on, the less of the unintentional stuff that could be doing harm will be happening.
Well, and one of the things too that's beautiful about right now, and you're experiencing this, I'm experiencing this, is my kids, after the summer, we're going to be all over the globe. Is Zoom has made things so much easier from a meeting standpoint, right? You talk about getting around the kitchen table. We've literally set our computer up at the kitchen table, turned on Zoom, and had everybody, Zoom in from different locations.
Yeah.
The kids are not there, but they're all there. And so you can still do these activities. Don't feel limited if your family's not together or you got to wait till a holiday or something else like that. It's, we picked a Sunday afternoon once a month to kind of get together and do those types of things. So let's tie up with this, and then I'm going to give you instructions on how to get the activity, and then we're going to take this to Q&A. So if there's one thing you want every family listening today to walk away thinking about, what's the one thing?
I would say intentionality. One thing, be intentional about what you want to pass on. And don't be scared to have conversations around money, because it's, like I said, it's communicated one way or another. So if you can be intentional about what you're actually passing on, that's where the goodness will happen. So
what you can do, if you want to get a copy of this exercise, we'll email it out to you. If you'll send an email to info at Paradiem, Paradiem.org, and put in the subject line inheritance exercise, and maybe just say that's what you want. We'll email it. We'll make sure that gets out to you. Again, info at Paradiem.org. And even if you're listening to this recording later, we'll have the activity so you can just send us an email and we'll get that exercise sent out to you. And so with that, what we're going to do is we're going to end the recording here in just a second. And then if you've got questions, pop those into the chat. We've already had a few questions come in before the webinar, so we'll answer those while we'll wait for a few others to come in. But I'm just so thankful for everyone that was here. Thankful for this discussion. Next month, we'll be together for our market commentary. The quarter will have ended, and Carson and I will be coming in and doing our quarterly market commentary in mid-July. I don't have the date right in front of me. I think it's around July 17th, but I don't have the date right in front of me. That'll be going out via email, so follow your emails and everything else. We'll be recording that as well. So thank you so much for being with us. Thea, thank you for joining us today. And y'all have a great day. Stick around if you want to be here for the Q&A.